Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope all you are doing fine. This is the next part of Magus of the Wizarding World. So let's start without any delay. Chapter 121, Cold Night. Hello Professor Lockhart, you wanted to see me. Greeted Matthew as he entered the office of the Dada Professor again, which was filled with portraits of the blonde man that were currently staring at him. Ah yes, Mr. Mason, I was expecting you. The headmaster informed me that you will assist me during the dueling club I was organizing, so my experienced self could share my knowledge with the students. Greeted the professor. Yes sir. Do you already have a date for the club planned? Of course. The first official meeting of the dueling club will be on the 17th of December. The official announcements will be soon on the notifications boards in the common rooms. Replied Lockhart with one of his annoying smiles that he probably practiced for hours before a mirror. I see. That's fine with me. So what are you planning to teach and what will my role be? Asked Matthew. You, my capable assistant, will have a showcase duel with me. Don't worry. You have nothing to fear. I know how scary that must have sounded, but I will just showcase the basics. I won't attack you too hard. Answered the blonde idiot, full of himself, believing Matthew was just another student with no real Dada teacher for the last few years. Oh, how fun that will be! Thought Matthew while politely replying, okay Professor, I trust you. And after that will I be responsible for the 1st to 4th years? Yes, you should show them the basic disarming and defense spells. I will of course show the higher years more advanced magics, which may prove too much for the younger students. Maybe I can show you after that also a few tricks. He boasted. Okay, Professor. I am fine with that. Is that everything? If we have nothing else to discuss, I see you on the 17th, said Matthew as he stood up. No, that's everything. Good day to you, Mr. Mason. Bye, Professor. Scene break. It was almost midnight as he left the office of Lockhart. Originally he planned to directly head for the Ravenclaw common room, but something he spotted on his mental map made him frown. It made him take a small detour, as his new target wasn't that far away. He was already a few corridors away from the entrance to the Ravenclaw tower as he began to hear steps just around the corner. The sound of bare feet on the cold, stone floor of a Hogwarts corridor at the end of November was accompanied by the sound of someone humming. As Matthew stepped around the corner, he saw the tiny frame of Luna Lovegood with her back to him. Luna, what are you doing out here all alone at night? It's currently dangerous in the castle. Especially since the Chamber of Secrets was opened. The monster is probably targeting students that are alone on the corridors. Asked Matthew. The small dirty blonde-haired girl turned to face him as she heard his voice. She was currently barefoot, and her skin was turning into an unnatural blue shade from the cold of the castle in this cold season. She stared at him with her cute blue eyes while visibly shivering from the cold. Hello, Matthew, nice to see you again. She greeted with her dreamy voice while staring at him with distant eyes. What happened to your shoes, Luna? Why are you out here freezing all alone? He asked, worried, already knowing the answer as he took his wand out and cast a warming charm on the small dirty blonde-haired first year. Luna, who stopped shivering now with the new warmth from the spell, looked at him before replying. Nargles, these small mischievous thieves took my shoes. They like to play pranks on me. And for some reason, the bronze knocker at the entrance to the Ravenclaw tower decided he didn't want to ask me a riddle today. So I choose to wander a bit through the castle, The night sky is so nice today," she answered dreamily. "Are you being bullied, Luna? You can tell me the truth," he asked with a soft voice. "No, it's just in the nature of Nargles to play pranks on people. Since I keep them away with my necklace, they probably decided to take my things while I am not there. They probably convinced the bronze knocker to help them. Luna, if other students bully you, we can take care of them. If you have troubles, you can always come to me. We are friends after all," he offered. For a moment her eyes became focused. "You would want to be friends with me?" she asked with her eyes glittering slightly. "Yes, why not? Did you forget? We became already friends on the train." This was the moment when she suddenly began to hug Matthew. "Thank you," she muttered with a tiny voice. "Don't worry about it. And you also have other friends. Isn't there Ginny? And you, Harry, Hermione, and Ron also became your friends on the train. I am sure they would help you if you asked them," he replied with a smile while hugging the tiny girl. "But Ginny isn't talking to me," she muttered. "She may have her own troubles currently. I believe once these troubles are resolved, she will be your friend as usual," he explained, realizing that Ginny didn't interact with Luna because of the dairy. "Come, let's visit Professor Flitwick. I am sure he will be able to help you and take care of the Nargles." Matthew took the small girl piggyback and carried her to the office Professor Flitwick, the head of House Ravenclaw, and knocked on his door. It took a few minutes before the small professor opened the door. "Mr. Mason, what are you doing here at this late, Miss Lovergood? What happened?" asked the half-goblin professor as he realized that Matthew was carrying Luna on his back. "You see, Professor, I just came from a discussion with Professor Lockhart about the dueling club, when I heard close to the Ravenclaw common room a young voice humming. Considering the current situation in the castle, I checked who it was since the voice sounded very young. It's not safe after all. I found Luna here all alone, without shoes, freezing and shivering to wander through the castle. Someone in Ravenclaw stole her things and prevented the bronze knocker from letting her into the common room. Some Ravenclaws are bullying her, Professor," explained Matthew. "What? Is that true, Mrs. Lovergood?" asked the professor. "I think the Nargles are playing pranks on me," explained the first year. "I see. Follow me, Mr. Mason, Miss Lovergood. We will take care of these Nargles," said Professor Flitwick with a furious look on his face as he led them to the Ravenclaw common room. And damn, the professor was small in stature, but he could be really scary if he wanted. The bronze knocker guarding the entrance to the common room was silenced with a simple charm. It prevented Luna from hearing and answering the riddle. The professor called the whole house into the common room and began to look for the culprits. In the end, it turned out to be a few older Ravenclaw girls who picked on Luna for her quirky demeanor. Her belongings were quickly returned to her, and the responsible S would serve detentions for the rest of the year. Matthew introduced Luna to Cho and her friends. Cho quickly took a liking to Luna, since her character was very different from her book counterpart thanks to Matthew's influence and the lack of Marietas, who was amongst the bullies. Hermione would also spend more time with Luna from now on since there was only 1 year difference. Even with their different personalities, they became friends. The other members of Ravenclaw still kept their distance from Luna because of her special character, but nobody dared to bully her anymore. The older students even paid special attention to that. Especially the 6th year prefect Penelope Clearwater kept an eye on Luna. Chapter 122, The Dueling Club. A few days after the incident with Luna, an announcement on the notice boards of every common room in Hogwarts exited the students of every house. There would be a dueling club in Hogwarts starting from December. Many of the students wanted to participate since the majority of the students had the opinion that it could be useful, even though some of them joked whether the monster of Slytherin was able to duel. But the hype was there. On the 17th of December at 8 o'clock that evening after dinner, a large crowd of students gathered in the Great Hall, especially students of the younger years. Only female post-owl students were present, probably the ones smitten by Lockhart's charms. Most of the older students seemed to have realized that the fraud Lockhart would hold the club and they wouldn't be able to learn a lot from him. The long dining tables had vanished and a golden stage had appeared along one wall, lit by thousands of candles floating overhead. The ceiling was velvety black once more and most of the school seemed to be packed beneath it, all carrying their wands and looking excited. "Ready, Mr. Mason? It's time for our grand entrance," said Lockhart from inside the teacher's room connected to the Great Hall where he was currently waiting with Matthew for the students to gather. "Yes, Professor," sighed Matthew, a bit annoyed but excited that he could soon beat up the fraud, as he followed the professor into the Great Hall. As they walked onto the stage he spotted Harry who was groaning as he saw Lockhart resplendent in robes of deep plum accompanied by Matthew himself, who grinned at the second year. Lockhart waved an arm for silence and called, "Gather round, gather round. Can everyone see me? Can you all hear me? Excellent. Now, Professor Dumbledore has granted me permission to start this little dueling club, to train you all in case you ever need to defend yourselves as I myself have done on countless occasions. For full details, see my published works." Matthew had to roll his eyes at that. Marketing is the only thing the idiot is good in, he thought. "Let me introduce my assistant, Mr. Mason," said Lockhart, flashing a wide smile. "He tells me he knows a tiny little bit about defense himself since he was granted permission to study Dada by himself by the headmaster this year and has sportingly agreed to help me with a short demonstration before we begin. Now, I don't want any of you, youngsters, to worry, you'll still have your classmate when I'm through with him, never fear." Matthew had a bloodthirsty grin as he stared at Lockhart, while the clueless professor talked to the students. Hermione and Cho had a worried look on their faces, Hermione probably because she still thinks that Lockhart was a capable wizard, while Cho was just worried whether Matthew would land in trouble at the end of the day. While most other students, especially the males including Harry and Ron, were rooting for Matthew. Once Lockhart was finished, he and Matthew turned to face each other and bowed, showing the proper respect to each other like commonly used in dueling circles. Then they raised their wands like swords in front of them. "As you see, we are holding our wands in the accepted combative position," Lockhart told the silent crowd. "On the count of 3, we will cast our first spells. Neither of us will be aiming to kill, of course." "Oh, are we?" thought Matthew. "We never discussed what spells or limits we would use in the duel." 1, 2, 3. Both of them swung their wand, while Lockhart used some kind of showy and complex movement. Matthew simply quickly pointed his wand with minimal wand movement and yelled, "Gigangus!" A giant ethereal fist shot out of his wand and flew at Lockhart, who wasn't able to do anything since he knew no magic besides the observation charm. The fist hit Lockhart directly and threw him back against the wall of the Great Hall. From the wall he landed on the floor and stopped moving. He lost consciousness from the impact. He shot another stunning charm at the knocked-out professor and turned to the students. "So that's taken care of. And that is also lesson 1. Don't try to show off or you will die in a fight." The overly complex wand style Professor Lockhart used just cost reaction time. If you didn't spend a large amount of time practicing and mastering one of these styles, keep it simple or you lose. At that comment, most of the students began to chuckle while some girls looked offended. Today I will teach you the basics of self-defense. They will also help you in dueling. But considering the current circumstances, self-defense is more important than dueling for now. After all, the monster of Slytherin won't bow before it attacks you. And it won't knock you out. At best you get petrified. If you are unlucky you die. Now Matthew had the full attention of the students. After all, the prospect of dying would always gather attention. Hermione raised her hands at that. Yes, Hermione. He called her. What should we do if we encounter the monster of Slytherin? She asked. That's a tricky question. First of all, don't look at it directly. It most likely has a death stare. If you look at it through, for example, a camera like Colin, or through a reflection like Mrs. Norris with the water on the ground, you will end up petrified, but not dead. So my tip: carries a mirror with you, and if you feel you are in danger, check the corners with it. Only travel in groups to be safe, since the monster doesn't seem to attack groups yet. And if you should be alone, run if you have the chance. Explained Matthew. Run. No proper wizard's runs. Interjected the arrogant voice of Draco Malfoy. There you are wrong, Mr. Malfoy. Running and dodging is the best defense in any battle. A shield costs a large amount of power and quickly runs out. Most shields are unable to block every spell. But if you don't even get hit, you don't have to worry about blocking the spell. It conserves your valuable energy and lets your life another day. Running and dodging is the basic in any kind of battle. That's also one of the reasons why you should try to stay in shape and work out. He explained. Once you dodge an incoming spell, you would need to neutralize your opponent. An effective way for a wizard is to remove their wand. Since most wizards are unable to use wandless magic, only powerful wizards like Dumbledore are still able to use wandless magic. Disarming in most cases means your opponent is neutralized. The incantation for the disarming charm is Expelliarmus. And the movement is like this. He showed off the spell. After he let the students practice the spell for a while, he addressed them once again. How about we practice in pairs? Let's see. To make it more interesting, let's pair up with different houses. He said, let's see, how about you, Harry? Against Mr. Malfoy there. Yes, that would be an interesting showdown, said Matthew as he paired the students. After all, he still needed to preserve the canon timeline to take advantage of it. And Harry revealing him being a Parselmouth was a major plot point in canon. After all, it confirmed to Dumbledore that Harry was a Horcrux. Chapter 123, Parselmouth. While Harry was paired with Malfoy, Hermione was paired with Daphne Greengrass. Matthew's goal was to expand his network of political connections in the wizarding world. And this was a chance to gain a connection to the Grey faction over Hermione. As the students paired up, some glared at each other, but many nodded politely to each other without ill will, like Daphne and Hermione, or Cho and her partner Katie Bell from the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Face your partners, called Matthew, as he stood on the platform above the crowd of students. And bow. This is after all only a friendly duel. And don't forget, try to disarm each other. Don't forget to dodge if possible. Harry and Malfoy barely inclined their heads, not taking their eyes off each other. The tension between both of them was unmissable. Get your wands ready, shouted Matthew. When I count to 3, cast your charms to disarm your opponents, only to disarm them, We don't want any accidents. 1, 2, 3. Meanwhile he put his attention on Harry and Malfoy. Harry swung his wand high, but Malfoy had already started on 2. His spell hit Harry so hard he felt as though he'd been hit over the head with a saucepan. He stumbled, but everything still seemed to be working, and wasting no more time, Harry pointed his wand straight at Malfoy and shouted, "Rictus Sempra!" A jet of silver light hit Malfoy in the stomach and he doubled up, wheezing. "Well, this doesn't look like disarming to me," said Matthew in direction of Malfoy and Harry, while the rest of the students continued battling. But the rivals ignored him as expected. Malfoy sank to his knees. Harry had hit him with a tickling charm, and he could barely move for laughing. While Harry did show his naivety through sportsmanship and didn't attack Malfoy on the floor, this turned out as a mistake. Gasping for breath, Malfoy pointed his wand at Harry's knees, choked, Tarantalegra. And the next second Harry's legs began to jerk around out of his control in a kind of quickstep. At this point Matthew had to intervene. He cancelled the spell on Harry with a point of his wand. Harry's feet stopped dancing, Malfoy stopped laughing, and they were able to look up. Well, the whole Great Hall was in chaos. The Great Hall was a battlefield. Students lay on the floor, somewhere even unconscious, while a haze of greenish smoke was hovering over the scene. But some students did well and followed instructions and kept it to only disarming, like Hermione and Daphne. They both stood facing each other and stopped attacking once Matthew broke up the fights. "Well, that was chaotic. What about only disarming? Did you misunderstand?" asked Matthew as he revived some students that lay unconscious on the floor and helped them up. "Maybe it's better if we have only one duel at the same time on the stage." Harry and Malfoy, both of you seemed very eager to fight each other. "How about you show us your skills on the stage? Up you go," he said. Harry and Malfoy headed up the stage and faced each other on opposite ends. "So let's see, the shield charm is Protego. There are generally 2 ways to use it. The first is as a shield around yourself, but it costs a lot of energy. Like this." He showed the charm. "The other method is like this, to use it to deflect spells, which conserves much more of your energy. One of the weaknesses of the Protego spell is that it only blocks spell. It isn't able to block projectiles or summons," explained Matthew. At the last part, Malfoy's eyes began to glitter ominously. "Let's see what you make out of it. Don't forget, just dodging is more efficient and easier. Let's see what you make of it. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go," he shouted. Malfoy raised his wand quickly and bellowed, "Serpent Sorcerer." The end of his wand exploded. The hall watched, as a long black snake shot out of it, fell heavily onto the floor between Harry and Malfoy, and raised itself, ready to strike. There were screams as the crowd backed swiftly away, clearing the floor. Just a few moments before Matthew activated a rune revival spell he placed beforehand on Lockhart. As the professor woke up, he just witnessed Malfoy summoning the snake, and with his acting skills, he was able to regain his bearings, forgetting that he was unconscious. "Good idea, Mr. Malfoy. That is an effective way to bypass a shield charm. Although a more experienced wizard can easily take care of it. Let me demonstrate it," said Matthew, but at that moment he got interrupted. "Allow me," shouted Lockhart, who didn't want to miss the opportunity to gain importance again. He brandished his wand at the snake and there was a loud bang. The snake, instead of vanishing, flew 10 feet into the air and fell back to the floor with a loud smack. Enraged, hissing furiously, it slithered straight toward Justin Finch Fletchley and raised itself again, fangs exposed, poised to strike. Perfect, mused Matthew as he watched the situation unfold. Just at this moment, Harry walked in direction of the snake like he was in trance and began to speak to it in Parcel tongue. The only beings understanding him were Matthew and the snake itself. Leave him alone, and miraculously, inexplicably, the snake slumped to the floor, docile as a thick, black garden hose, its eyes now on Harry. Harry visibly relaxed. Matthew felt the snake wouldn't attack Harry. This seemed to be an additional sense only a parcel mouth had. Some kind of empathy towards snakes. That was probably why Harry also relaxed at that moment. Harry looked up at Justin, grinning, probably expecting to see Justin looking relieved, or puzzled, or even grateful, but certainly not angry and scared. "What do you think you're playing at?" he shouted, and before Harry could say anything, Justin had turned and stormed out of the hall. This was the moment when Matthew decided to step forward and send the snake back to where it was conjured from. Before he addressed the hall, "I think it's time to end the dueling club for today. Don't you think so, Professor?" addressed Matthew the confused professor who just nodded flabbergasted. "Harry, stay behind for a moment," said Matthew as the students left the hall, making a bow around Harry as if they were scared of him. Not only Harry stayed behind but also Ron, Hermione, and also Cho. "Professor, thank you for your lessons today. We will also take our leave for today. You maybe should report to the headmaster how the club went today. Don't you think so?" said Matthew as he led the group out of the Great Hall, only seeing that the professor just nodded before returning through the teacher entrance. While Harry was confused, neither Ron, Hermione or Cho said something to him. Matthew led them to an empty classroom where they could talk without interruption. "Well, that was a shocker," chuckled Matthew. "Based on your expression, I would dare you to have no idea what just happened in the Great Hall and why everyone is reacting so shocked." "Yes, why was everyone so shocked?" asked Harry as his emerald green eyes wandered over the people present in the room. Chapter 124, New Attacks. "You're a parcel mouth. Why didn't you tell us?" asked Ron directly as Harry looked at him. "I'm a what?" said Harry. "A parcel mouth. You have the magical ability to communicate with snakes," explained Matthew. "I know," said Harry. "I mean, that's only the second time I've ever done it. I accidentally set a boa constrictor on my cousin Dudley at the zoo once, long story, but it was telling me it had never seen Brazil and I sort of set it free without meaning to. That was before I knew I was a wizard." "A boa constrictor told you it had never seen Brazil?" Ron repeated faintly. "Oh, I remember that. I was there, that's when we met for the first time. So you also talked to the snake?" "I thought it was just accidental magic that made the glass vanish," remembered Matthew. "Right, that was back then." "So," said Harry, "I bet loads of people here can do it." "Not exactly," replied Matthew. "Remember when we talked about magical abilities a while ago? Like Luna has her magical sight. The ability to speak parcel tongue is also one. People who have that ability are called parcel mouth, and you seem to be one of them. And these gifts are not very common." "Harry, this is bad," injected Ron, worried. "What's bad?" said Harry, who began to look angry. "What's wrong with everyone? Listen, if I hadn't told that snake not to attack Justin." "Oh, that's what you said to it? What do you mean?" "You were there, you heard me." Matthew interrupted both of them before it got out of hand. "No, we didn't understand you. All we heard was hissing. You spoke a completely different language." Parcel tongue, the ancient tongue of snakes. I spoke a different language. But, I didn't realize, how can I speak a language without knowing I can speak it? Asked Harry, confused. That's why it is a magical ability. You can speak it naturally, explained Matthew. Okay, I spoke another language. And what is so bad about it? I just stopped a massive snake biting off Justin's head, he said. What does it matter how I did it as long as Justin doesn't have to join the headless hunt? Matthew began explaining before the other could explain it with their prejudiced view. If we were in another country it wouldn't really matter. Having that ability by default isn't even anything bad. In India, you would actually have gained a higher status, since parcel mouthers are very respected there, he explained, but unfortunately we are in Britain. The ability has bad rumors around it here. Why do you think the symbol of House Slytherin is a snake? Because Sorlaser Slytherin was famous for being a parselmouth, and his descendants inherited the ability from him. But I'm not, said Harry, with a panic he couldn't quite explain. You'll find that hard to prove, said Hermione. He lived about 1,000 years ago, for all we know, you could be. And did you already forget, Harry? It's nothing bad to be related to Slytherin, since for all we know the rumors around him are probably false, added Matthew. You are right, muttered Harry, still looking worried. Don't worry, Harry. We don't think differently of you. It's like Matthew said. Only in Britain are there bad rumors about being a parselmouth, added Cho. See. And at least we now know what kind of monster is in the Chamber of Secrets, added Matthew. What? How would you know that? Asked Hermione. Sigh. What are your heads for? Did you already forget the voice only Harry heard on Halloween? What voice? Asked Cho. We were only the first ones where Mrs. Norris was petrified because Harry heard a voice that wanted to murder someone. We followed it and found Mrs. Norris, explained Matthew. Since only Harry was able to hear it, it must have been a snake. 1,000-year-old snake. That makes sense. But what kind of snake petrifies people? Asked Cho. Well, that's something you guys can find out. I am pretty sure Professor Dumbledore is already aware of the identity of Slytherin's monster. All facts considered, it's pretty obvious. The more important questions are where is the Chamber of Secrets, and who is the heir of Slytherin, explained Matthew. Harry, you shouldn't worry too much. Rather keep calm and don't get into the trouble. Tilda scene break tilde. In the end, all explanations and logical arguments didn't pacify Harry's worries. That's probably why he didn't fit into Ravenclaw. Harry ended up in trouble the next day. Like in canon, he tried to find Justin and explain the truth to him. And well, he did found him, petrified together with the ghost of nearly headless Nick. Where he got caught by Peeves the poltergeist, who instantly began to alarm the whole castle that no living or ghost was safe anymore. After all, Peeves loved chaos. In the end, Harry got dragged to the headmaster's office by Professor McGonagall. But Dumbledore knew after all who the heir of Slytherin truly was and didn't see any point in punishing Harry in any form. After all, he did nothing. The headmaster was probably distracted by now, by the fact that Harry was a parselmouth, and began his first research into Horcruxes or other possible origins for Harry's ability. Harry, on the other hand, gained also new insights from the Sorting Hat about himself and his potential in the characteristics Slytherin stood for, and also he learned from Hagrid that his roosters got killed, which he would share with Ron, Matthew, and Hermione. On the other hand, the rumors about him being the heir of Slytherin manifested amongst the students. Very few students believed these rumors to be false, even amongst the logical Ravenclaws. Pointing out things like Matthew and Hermione being Muggleborns and some of his closest friends didn't matter to the famous Hogwarts rumor mill. Well, the only few ones who made a joke of it were the Weasley twins, who accompanied Harry and announced him as heir of Slytherin everywhere. While the rest of the Weasley didn't find it amusing, especially Ginny. Her condition became worse, although she was able to hide it very well. Soon she would reach her breaking point and try to dispose of the diary. But her condition was still reversible and would heal in a few months once the Horcrux was destroyed. These rumors and the real dangers in the castle would empty it over the winter holidays. The only mentionable students staying behind would be Harry, Hermione, the Weasleys, Draco and his two Goonies, and Matthew himself. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley decided to visit Bill in Egypt during the holidays, which made the other Weasleys stay in Hogwarts. His parents decided to go skiing over the holidays and he currently had no interest in winter sports. The free time he would have over the winter holidays would be the perfect opportunity to take a deeper look at the time turner to understand its workings. Time was a dangerous branch of magic, not the universe, to mess with, but there was no doubt it would be worth it. Cho, on the other hand, left the castle to spend time with her family. They had another enjoyable date in Hogsmeade together in December before the holidays started, where they completed some of their Christmas shopping. The Golden Trio, on the other hand, was ready to act during the Christmas holidays with their Polyjuice potion plan. Hermione was impressed by Matthew's skill in the art of potions. She compared the original recipe and Matthew's modified one, and only admired his work. It made her even more determined to work harder. She didn't want to fall behind. This competitiveness was a part of her character and made Matthew worry whether his influence would make her work even harder next year than in the original timeline. He hoped his Christmas present would prevent that. Chapter 125, Christmas Time. The last term before the Christmas holidays ended and the castle became silent as the majority of students boarded the Hogwarts Express and drove off in direction of London. Instead of gloomy, the castle felt rather peacefully now without all the rumors about the heir. The snow on the grounds added to the feeling of Christmas and winter and turned the area into a beautiful white color. Hermione and Matthew were the only two Ravenclaws left in the tower. Luna told Matthew, excited, that she would visit Denmark with her father to look for Crumple-Horned Snorkack before she left. As for Cho, she would celebrate Christmas with her parents. Since there were only Harry and the Weasleys in the Gryffindor Tower, they invited Hermione and Matthew often to stay with them during the evenings. They played Exploding Snap and Wizarding Chess for hours until Matthew created a magical animated set of Monopoly with figures moving on voice command, animated buildings, cards, and board. Even with small fake galleons, sickles and nuts. Percy, who until then often left the tower because he disapproved of what he termed their childish behavior. He had already told them pompously that he was only staying over Christmas because it was his duty as a prefect to support the teachers during this troubled time. Joined them to play Monopoly as he seemed to enjoy the game and its business-like rules very much. During the mornings, Matthew spent a lot of time studying the time turner inside his trunk. His Magitech drones meanwhile were almost finished sorting through the room of hidden things. But unfortunately, they didn't find a lot of exciting stuff since the time turner. The most useful things were the notes of students and professors with exotic snippets of knowledge and treasures like jewelry, currency, and so on dispersed all over the room. Christmas morning dawned, cold and white. Matthew, who was deeply asleep since they played until late in the Gryffindor common room, got woken up very early by Hermione, who burst in, fully dressed and carrying presents for him. "Wake up," she said loudly, pulling back the curtains at the window. "Morning, Hermione." He replied sleepy, "and Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas to you too," she said as she threw his presents to him with a smile. "How come you are waking me up today, especially this early?" he asked, still sleepy. "Well, it is Christmas. By the way, thank you for your present. I loved your introduction on the subjects. Next year, I will make sure to read all your notes. But I will probably not attend to divination and Muggle studies. I will also try to make sure that Harry and Ron don't, since the subjects are this bad. And the potion is ready. Could you take a look at it before we use them? Just to be sure," she replied happily. He gifted her a nice collection of notes to all the subjects in Hogwarts and an introduction to them. They were in an enchanted notebook with a search function he created himself and self-updating, connected to his notebooks to the subjects where he wrote the pieces of information down that he wanted to share. "Oh, so you want to do it tonight?" he asked, now awake. "Yes, it's the best opportunity after the Christmas dinner. Nobody would expect anything," she explained. But make sure you check whether you gathered human hairs. The only female Slytherin in the castle is Millicent Bulstrode, and she has a cat. Although I would enjoy seeing a cat girl, Hermione, I don't believe you would look that way," he teased jokingly. At that comment she began to blush. "Yes, I didn't forget your warning. The first hair I picked from her cloak was indeed a cat hair, but now I got one of hers. You should get ready for breakfast," she quickly explained before she left his room with a red flushed head. After she left, Matthew decided to open his Christmas presents, as he hoped the others would like his presents. For his father, he prepared a collection of magical liquor, and for his mom the best cosmetics in Diagon Alley. He gifted Harry enchanted Quidditch glasses for bad weather conditions and some sweets, for Ron also a collection of sweets. He pranked the twins with his self-created color-changing gums, which turned the person who ate them into the color of the gum, and some chili chocolate who made someone literally spew fire. It was also meant as his sales pitch to become a co-owner of their joke shop in the future. Ginny got some self-correcting feathers and sweets, for Percy his own set of enchanted Monopoly. He hadn't much connection to the both of them, but it didn't hurt to be in the good graces of the Weasleys. For Luna, he got a book about the platypus, since he was sure this was an animal she would love to discover, and he was sure one of the Lovergood's next holiday targets would be Australia. Cho was a completely different matter. What does someone gift to a person he went on some dates with? In the end, he decided to create something himself. He froze some crystal clean water of the Black Lake and transfigured it into a small ice eagle that looked like the symbol of Ravenclaw and enchanted it to never melt. He put it onto a gold necklace he created with alchemy from some gold he found in the room and enchanted it with some useful protective charms. This would be probably a nice gift, maybe somewhat over the top. He himself got mainly books for Christmas, from Hermione a homework planner, and some chocolate. From Luna he actually got a book about magical animals that he didn't know yet. He supposed it was from the Lovergood library. They were after all also a pretty old family and must have some interesting books. From Cho, he got a framed photo that they took on their first Hogsmeade date together, some self-made sweets. He also got a famous Weasley sweater from Mrs. Weasley in blue with a bronze-colored M on it. Once he finished unpacking, he joined the others on breakfast. He decided to take the day off today and enjoyed Christmas with the others. Christmas dinner at Hogwarts was as always enjoyable. There was no one who wouldn't like it. The Great Hall was decorated with nice Christmas trees as always, and the mood was generally good like every year. After the Christmas dinner, he saw the Golden Trio off to their mission after confirming that their potion was working. They succeeded in infiltrating the Slytherin common room with Polyjuice potion. There were no mishaps this time of someone turning into a cat. In the end, they gained new valuable information for their investigation, although to especially Harry's and Ron's disappointment, Malfoy wasn't the heir of Slytherin and they had no idea who it was. But they found out that the Chamber of Secrets was already opened once in the past, but they had no idea by whom yet. For Matthew, this was nothing new, but just a confirmation that everything went in his control. It wouldn't take long before he could begin to act to get the Horcrux and the Basilisk corpse. But for now, something else gained his attention. A day after Christmas and Operation Polyjuice, he received a letter addressed to him from Tonk's solicitor office in Diagon Alley. Chapter 126, Peter Pettigrew 1. The contents of the letter was brief but important. They informed Matthew that everything was ready to help Sirius. Not only did he collect the eyewitness accounts of Muggles and Aurors present during Sirius's capture, he also accessed his files in the Ministry and secured proof that he didn't get a trial and was only temporarily imprisoned, still waiting for his trial. Additionally, he collected signed statements of old school friends on the relationship of Sirius and James and Lily Potter. He even contacted Remus Lupin and informed him of his investigation and their suspicions of Sirius' innocence, and gained the confirmation and a witness that Pettigrew was a rat and a Magus. Last but not least, Edward Tonks even arranged a meeting with Sirius in Azkaban under the pretense of discussing matters of inheritance concerning the Black family and his wife, who was a member of them. In reality, he updated Sirius on their progress and plans and collected his testimony under Veritaserum and his memories of the event, just in case he has to flee because of someone trying to remove him before he can be freed and his innocence confirmed. So all we are missing is Peter Pettigrew to have an airtight case. I should make my move now, since in a few days is the New Year meeting of the Wizengamot, where Sirius' case can be discussed without giving them a chance to react. Muttered Matthew as he realized now was the perfect time to make their move, and left the common room and headed in direction of the Gryffindor Tower. Matthew always kept an eye on Pettigrew, if the rat wasn't accompanying Ron to breakfast, probably in order to check the news in the Daily Prophet. He spent most of his time in the Gryffindor Tower since he was relatively safe there from possible predators. Many students had cats as pets and he kept out of their way, so he wouldn't have to blow his cover. Ickle Mathewkins. How can we help you? And what was that white glowing bird? With your voice, greeted Fred and George with their famous twin speech as he arrived at a meeting point close to the Gryffindor Tower. That was my Patronus. Besides being one of the few effective methods to combat Dementus, they have another handy usage. They can be used for mid-range communications like you just witnessed, explained Matthew. You can use the Patronus charm? Asked the twins in awe. Mate, you need to teach us that. Maybe in the future. It's a rather complex charm with a heavy drain on your magical reserves. I can only cast it because I train every day to grow my reserves. You will have to be a bit older before you can hope to cast it safely, explained Matthew. I need your help, guys. There may be a dangerous person hidden in the Gryffindor Tower. How old is the rat of your brother Ron? Asked Matthew, coming directly to the point. You mean Scabbers? It was Percy's rat before he gifted it to Ron, explained one of the twins. Did he find him maybe around 10 to 11 years ago? Continued Matthew. Yeah, that's about right. You don't mean that Scabbers is the dangerous person? Asked the twins, realizing the implication. The rat lived with them for over a decade, and if it was an animagus then it would mean an adult lived hidden in their home, around their little sister. It's probably the truth. The person I believe hiding as Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew, someone believed to be dead. Recently I gained the information that he had a rat animagus form. Currently, it's believed that Pettigrew was killed by Sirius Black, the supposedly betrayer of the Potters. All that remained of him was a finger. But what spell leaves only a finger behind? And 10 years is a long time for a garden rat to live. The timing is curious. A rat with one claw missing appears a few weeks after a rat animagus disappears, wouldn't you think? Summarized Matthew. We need to capture him, said one of the angered twins as they wanted to rush back to the Gryffindor tower. Calm down. Don't be a hothead, Gryffindor. Stopped Matthew them. I agree we need to capture him, but it is a Death Eater we are handling here if my theory is right. He explained. Shit, what should we do? Should we get the teachers or even the ministry? Asked one of the twins. No, this is also a chance to get Harry away from his Muggle relatives. You probably have already an idea how they treat him, but it is worse. Sirius Black is Harry's godfather. This is Harry's chance for a loving family. There are many in the ministry who don't want Sirius to be innocent, like the Malfoys, who have a rather big interest in him never being free. So there could be some accidents during the capture if we contact the Era office. I also don't trust Dumbledore in that matter. He has an unhealthy interest in Harry staying with his relatives. That was also the reason why I began investigating Sirius Black. And I am working with a lawyer who has already begun gathering the evidence. If we capture the rat and reveal him under enough eyewitnesses, we would be able to prove Sirius' innocence without a doubt. Explained Matthew. So we still need to capture him ourselves. Yes, but we need to be careful. Harry and your siblings are in his close proximity. If we strike, we need to make sure that we can take him out quickly without any chance of him escaping. I would suggest we do it as soon as possible. For that, we would need to set up a trap. But first of all, we need a way to keep an eye on him so he doesn't get alarmed. If he was able to set up Sirius in such a way that even Dumbledore was fooled, he is not simple. Maybe one of you could keep an eye on him or something and alarm me while I set up the trap. Explained Matthew. Fred and George looked at each, holding a silent conversation through their looks. Matthew was already aware of what they were discussing, the Marauder's map. This was part of his plan to hide his mental map. Since there was a slight chance that the twins could realize he has something similar to the Marauder's map, but he couldn't do it without the twins since he didn't want to reveal the fact that he is able to enter other common rooms without help. We may have a way to keep an eye on Pettigrew's location, started one of the twins after a few moments, as the other took out an empty old piece of parchment. The other twin took out his wand and tipped the map with it. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. Suddenly a drop of ink appeared at the point the wand touched the blank piece of parchment and began to form a text. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's map. Then the text began to deform and spread and began to show corridors, rooms, and names above footprints. The map showed the whole castle and its inhabitants' locations. That's useful and surprising. It seems somehow fate is on our side, chuckled Matthew. This is the secret to our success, explained one twin. The Marauder's map. Wait, What do you mean fate is on our side? Well, it's pretty simple. We are currently trying to prove Padfoot's innocence by capturing Wormtail, the traitor of the Marauders. Laughed Matthew as he explained the truth to the twins. They both stared at him with shock. Chapter 127, Peter Pettigrew 2. What? Cried both twins out at the same time. We are currently trying to prove the innocence of one marauder by capturing the traitor amongst them. Began Matthew to explain patiently. Are you serious? Asked one of the twins, maybe Fred, baffled. No, I am Matthew. Padfoot is serious and currently unlawfully in Azkaban if Wormtail, whose name is Peter Pettigrew, turns out to be Scabbers. Explained Matthew with a deadpan expression. The twins stared at him as if he grew a second head, a name pun. That's your joke, muttered one of them. Just wait until you meet the real Sirius, that's one of his favorites. How do you know that? Well, I've got my information from the last living, not supposed dead or imprisoned marauder through a third party that is helping me investigate this case. Mooney. You are not joking, mate. The marauders are our heroes. If this turns out to be some elaborate prank, you would regret that. Wait, Sirius Black and Pettigrew are Padfoot and Wormtail, Mooney is alive. Are you saying, realized one of the twins. Yes, Prongs was Harry's, Father James Potter. So maybe you should return the map to Harry one day, it's after all part of his inheritance and would make him very happy. Added Matthew as the twins stared at each other, but for now let's focus on the task at hand, after all, we are about to engage a Death Eater and traitor. Let's see. Muttered one of the twins as they began to search the map for Pettigrew's name. There. He is really there. In the second-year boys' dorm at the Gryffindor Tower. Pointed one of the twins out angrily as he found him. There was the name of Peter Pettigrew currently not moving, resting at one window. Okay. This situation is perfect, said Matthew. Most students are still on holiday, so there is the least possible amount of targets in the tower that Pettigrew could hurt or use as a hostage. We can't risk Pettigrew escaping. With the current political situation in magical Britain, Sirius would be never set free. I will set up a trap in the common room that will prevent the rat from escaping through a hole. So you will need to let me into the tower. Meanwhile, one of you keeps an eye on Pettigrew through the map and warns me if he should leave the sleeping dorm. I can do that, said one of the twins who Matthew knew was Fred through the map. Good. George, you will lead your younger siblings and Harry out of the tower without alarming them. He thought about the diary of Tom Riddle in Ginny's possession. There was no need to alarm young Tom Riddle to change his plans. Make sure that especially Ginny doesn't find out what really is going on. It's better if she doesn't know that a middle-aged Death Eater lived with your family, who knows what he could have seen. No need to traumatize the girl unnecessarily. He explained, after all, she will need already enough sessions with a mind healer after this year. Okay, I can do that. I think it's time for them to learn where the kitchen is. Agreed George. Once the three of them finished discussing their plans, they headed to the Gryffindor Tower, where they entered the common room through the portrait hole behind the fat lady. After spending a bit of time with Ron, Ginny, and Harry, who were playing gobstones in front of the Gryffindor fireplace, George pretended to show them the kitchen after Ron complained he was hungry. Good that the youngest Weasley boy was such a glutton. Fred and Matthew stayed behind and checked the map once the room was empty. The rat was still in the second-year sleeping dorm for the boys. Warn me if he should move. asked Matthew silently as he took his wand out and began to place a runic ward scheme surrounding the common room. Once Matthew would activate it, Pettigrew wouldn't be able to escape while in his rat form, since the ward scheme would form a force field preventing anyone from escaping it while active. Although escaping it isn't that hard, since it was only a quickly set up scheme without any ward stones or physical anchors. But still impossible for a rat to break through, since it was too weak physically. He would need a few offensive spells in order to overpower it. Enough time for Matthew to take Pettigrew out. Its only purpose was to prevent him to escape in his annoying rat form, which was hard to catch thanks to its small size. Once he was finished setting the scheme up, he turned to Fred. "Can you get Scabbers pretending to take him to the kitchen where Ron is? Just throw him into the common room once you are at the stairs. Stay outside the ward. I will take him out myself," said Matthew. "Are you sure I can help?" "That rat was spying on my family," responded to Fred, unwillingly to let Matthew fend for himself. "Fred, trust me here. You will be in my way. This is a real Death Eater, not some Slytherin throwing a childish curse at you. I am far more powerful than you. If I have to protect you during a possible fight, it would only make it harder," reasoned Matthew, determined. "If everything follows our plan, this will be over quickly. But it could turn out really dangerous." "Sigh, fine. But the next time you will let us fight. We are the same age. You could teach us," requested Fred. "We will see. For now, let's focus on our task." Fred headed upstairs to the boys' dorm while Matthew hid around the corner so Pettigrew wouldn't get alarmed and was caught unaware of the danger. After all, why fight if you could win through an ambush? Matthew concentrated on sound from upstairs. Once he heard a sound approaching from above, he readied himself. "Catch!" shouted Fred as he threw Pettigrew down the stairs into the Gryffindor common room. "Scree!" cried the rat as it flew down. Once Matthew saw it inside his ward scheme, he instantly activated the trap and an almost invisible force field surrounded the common room. The from the flight disoriented rat tried to escape through the next best exit but crashed against the force field while Matthew targeted it with his wand. Anima Reversa. He cast the Animagus reversal charm. A white light left his wand and hit the still confused rat Animagus. The grey garden rat with one missing claw began to expand in size. It took on more and more human features as his transformation began to reverse. Until only an extremely short and fat man with grubby skin, small watery eyes, and a pointed nose, all of which were lingering attributes of his Animagus rat form, remained on the floor. He was dirty and his hair was already colorless mouse brown and had thinned considerably. He acquired a large bald patch during the last decade he spent as Scabbers. "What happened?" he squeaked, probably a side effect of his Animagus form, while still laying flat and disoriented on the floor. Before he could react and comprehend what had happened, Matthew shot a stunner in his back and knocked the fat Death Eater out. Before he conjured an anti-Animagus version of his cursed chains around the traitor that he just created in order to capture him, since he didn't know of any other Death Eater that was Animagi. That was easier. Well, nothing beats preparations and future knowledge. Once he lowered the wards, Fred walked down the stairs staring enraged at the now bound traitor on the floor. "Fred, may I introduce? This is Messer Wormtail, the traitor of the Marauders." Chapter 128, Peter Pettigrew 3. Fred stared with disgust at the rat. "So that is the piece of trash that betrayed his friends and probably spied at my sister." "Yes, but no cursing him. We still need him to free an innocent man." warned Matthew as he took out a box with flu powder out of his expanded pocket that he prepared beforehand. Keep your wand ready to stun him if he should wake up. I need to contact the lawyer I am working with to help Sirius, he said as he made sure that Fred had his wand pointed at the unconscious Pettigrew as Matthew approached the fireplace in the Gryffindor common room. Matthew knew that Ted Tonks currently wasn't in his office since it still was winter holidays. Good that he knew his flu address. He threw a handful of flu powder into the fire before shouting, "Tonks residence," and stuck his head into the green flames. It was a strange feeling. He felt the fire and magic surrounding his head, but it didn't burn him. On the other side, he looked at a kitchen with some outdated but also modern elements. The kitchen tools like the stove and oven were modern, but there were also some medieval-looking knives, cauldrons, and more. The interior design and furniture looked a bit outdated and rustic but were nice. In the center stood a kitchen table for 4 people, which was currently occupied by a person. At the kitchen table sat a young woman reading a magazine. The young witch had a pale heart-shaped face and dark twinkling eyes. And currently, she had bubblegum pink hair, but Matthew knew that could change. After all, he recognized her as Nymphadora Tonks, the metamorph Magus, daughter of Edward Tonks and Andromeda Tonks knee black. She was currently deeply in her magazine and whipping on her chair. "Hello," greeted Matthew loud and clearly. It was loud enough to startle Tonks, who instantly lost her balance and fell with her chair onto the floor with a small panicking cry. "Well, that's one way to meet a new person," said Matthew, amused, already aware of her clumsiness since it was one of her most famous traits. She quickly stood up, while being a bit flustered, and looked around for the origin of the voice before realizing that the voice came from the fireplace. "Who are you?" she asked, still embarrassed. My name is Matthew Mason. I need to talk with Edward Tonks." "Did I use the correct flu address?" "Oh, then you are right here. That's my dad." "What do you need from him?" she asked after calming down. "He told me about you. You must be she whose first name I must not use, Tonks." "Nice to meet you. I am one of his clients and really need to talk with him," replied Matthew, grinning. "Oh, so you know the rules. Good, because I will hex you if you don't. You can call me Tonks." She teased back, "Wait here, I will get him, he is currently upstairs." After a short while, she came back with Edward. "Matthew, good to see you. Did you get my letter?" "Yes, I did, that's why I am here." "Good, everything is ready. Once you know where the rat is, we can contact the DMLE to capture him," he said while nodding. "Then you should contact Madam Bones now. And your daughter should also contact Moody. She's still learning under him in the Arrow Academy, after all, so she will be able to directly contact him. He should make sure to bring some of the trustworthy Arrows and none of the corrupt ones. After all, we want the case to be airtight," explained Matthew. No way he wanted to risk that a pure-blood supremacist like Dawlish in the Arrow office would screw that up now to hide the evidence. "That's no problem. But where should I send them to capture him?" asked Edward, slightly confused. That's what you mean. Don't worry about it. I already captured him. He is currently lying 2 meters beside me, bound and stunned." "What? That's dangerous. He is a Death Eater." "Calm down. He is already taken care of and someone is guarding him while I am talking to you. I will be waiting in the Great Hall for your arrival. Bring them as fast as possible. I will also contact Dumbledore and the other professors so we can have a Veritaserum questioning directly there with many witnesses so that Fudge can't hide it." See you soon," said Matthew as he ended the call. Back in the common room, he turned to Fred. "Good job, Fred. Can you get Professor McGonagall to call the teachers and Dumbledore to the Great Hall? I will bring the rat there." "No problem, mate. I will get them," he said as he hurried to her office. Tilda scene break Tilda. After Matthew levitated the fat body of Peter Pettigrew into the Great Hall of Hogwarts, which was currently empty since it still were holiday and not meal time, he deposited him on the floor in the center of the hall and sat down on the Gryffindor table beside him. He didn't have to wait long until the large doors opened and Professor Dumbledore, followed by McGonagall, Snape, Flitwick, and Sprout, entered with Fred leading them. "If this is a joke, Mr. Weasley, you will have detentions with me for the next mon," warned Professor McGonagall Fred before she stopped with a shocked face as she saw Pettigrew laying on the floor. "How is that possible? He should be dead." "Indeed, most curious and troubling," said Dumbledore slowly, deep in his thought. "If this turns out to be Mr. Pettigrew, then there was an innocent person who spent 11 years in Azkaban. See, Professor, this isn't a joke," added Fred. "Welcome, professors. We found a Death Eater hidden in the Gryffindor Tower. But don't worry, we already contacted the Aurors. They should be soon here," greeted Matthew with a cheery voice. "Why didn't you contact a professor, Mr. Mason?" asked Flitwick with his wand already in his hand, pointing at the body on the floor. "Sorry, there was no time for it. He could have escaped or harmed the students currently in the tower. Once we were sure Ron's rat was an animagus, we acted quickly. George brought Ron, Ginny, and Harry in safety, while Fred and I ambushed him. But that's not so important right now. Professor Snape, can you get some Veritaserum and give it to Pettigrew? We need to be fast," asked Matthew politely. "Mr. Mason, interrogating someone under Veritaserum is illegal. You can only administer the potion if the Wizengamot agrees," interrupted Professor Dumbledore. "But that's not what I asked for." "Yes, the Aurors aren't allowed to use the potion without the approval of the Wizengamot. But there are some loopholes in the law. So why not use it to make sure an innocent can get free? Or isn't that in your interest?" asked Matthew calmly. The other professors besides Snape looked at Dumbledore strangely. "The potion can be only handled by certified potion masters or with the approval of the Wizengamot. Professor Snape is a certified potion master, and I know he has always a batch Veritaserum for his higher classes ready. The Aurors are allowed to use any evidence they find. How it is once they arrive. Once they arrived, they, unfortunately, have to make sure that nothing happens to any evidence. So we are kinda in a hurry. So if you would, Professor Snape," addressed Matthew the potion master with a meaningful look. "I see. That's very Slytherin of you, Mr. Mason. I will be on my way," sneered Professor Snape. "Thank you, Professor Snape. Professor Sprout, maybe you could go with him in case he needs some help to find the potion. After all, we are in a hurry here," added Matthew. Professor Sprout nodded and left with the potion master, while Dumbledore stared at Matthew thoughtfully before he addressed Matthew. "That's very smart of you, Mr. Mason, finding loopholes in the law like that. But is that really necessary?" "Thank you, Professor. I worked it out with my law wizard. And yes, it is. There are parties like the Malfoys that have an interest in hindering Mr. Black from getting free," explained Matthew with a smug grin, knowing he outplayed the headmaster here. Chapter 129, Peter Pettigrew 4. "I see. You put a lot of thought into this, Mr. Mason. Even hired and law wizard in advance. Could it be you knew of Pettigrew and didn't alarm a teacher? Asked Dumbledore with a twinkle in his eyes as he stared over his half-moon glasses at Matthew. No, Professor, I didn't know that Scabbers was Pettigrew until today. Lied Matthew. I hired Mr. Tonks as law wizard to help Harry. What do you mean? Why does Mr. Potter need help? Asked Professor McGonagall, shocked. Are you aware where Harry is currently living, Professor? My parents had a business meeting with his guardians during the summer. And what I found there wasn't pretty, and I believe I only saw the top of the mountain. Harry wouldn't explain more, but I could see in his eyes it was even worse. At that, Professor McGonagall glared at the headmaster. Albus, I told you they were the worst kind of people. We should have looked for other possibilities. The headmaster looked suddenly older. Yes, Minerva, I admit it was a mistake to leave Harry with the Dursleys. I had no idea that it would be so bad. But back then there weren't many safe options. Even from today's perspective, I am unsure who could have taken Harry in and granted him enough protection. Admitted Dumbledore with a pained look in his eyes as the twinkling visibly diminished. But how did that to you, realizing that Mr. Pettigrew was alive, Mr. Mason? Well, to be honest, I am deeply disappointed in you, headmaster, or every professor in Hogwarts who knew Mr. Black and the law enforcement. The next day after visiting Harry, I began to investigate. And just from reading the old newspaper article, I found the whole thing fishy. Professor, what kind of curse or spell only leaves one finger behind? A blasting curse would leave a total mess behind, a withering curse would leave dust behind, and for it to stop at the finger would need a very specific curse that isn't worth the arithmetic and spell creation work needed. And do you believe that someone who lived with James Potter like a brother and was so loyal to him during their youth would suddenly betray him without a sign? The possibility that the more distant and cowardly friend is the culprit was more likely. So I hired Mr. Tonks, whose wife coincidentally is Mr. Black's cousin. And he recently gained some critical information from Mr. Lupin that Pettigrew was like Mr. Black, an animagus. A rat, to be precise. All three professors present felt ashamed that they realized the obvious signs. Professor Dumbledore continued the thought. I see. And young Ronald possesses a rat that was very old and missed its right claw. It seems that in my high age I became more blind than I believed. And there are no animagus detection wards in the castle since they are so rare. He muttered to himself. Soon Professor Snape and Sprout returned with a vial of Veritaserum. Good Severus, if you would do us the honor of administering the serum to Peter. I can already feel the arrival of the DMLE through the wards. Requested Dumbledore with a tone in his voice that left no space for discussion. A few moments after Professor Snape woke Pettigrew up and let 3 drops of Veritaserum drip into the rat's mouth, and his eyes turned distant. It didn't take long as the large doors of the Great Hall opened and Edward Tonks, Madam Bones, followed by Mad-Eye Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and trainee Nymphadora Tonks entered. Dumbledore, what is this about? Began Madam Bones before her eyes fell on Pettigrew and she stopped in shock. Ah, good timing, Amelia. You just arrived in time to interrogate Peter under Veritaserum, who we found alive hidden in the castle, said Dumbledore. I can't interrogate him under Veritaserum. That is against the law. Even if he is supposedly dead, the protections of the law still apply to him, she said with a critical eye as she stared at Pettigrew. This was the moment when Mr. Tonks interfered and cleared the situation up. The DMLE isn't allowed to use Veritaserum to interrogate someone themselves. But if he is already under it, there is no law forbidding them from legally interrogating someone. And Professor Snape is a potion master and is allowed to legally use Veritaserum if the situation requires it, which would be the case here," he explained while smirking while Moody snorted amused at the loophole in the laws. "I see. Well, since everything is according to the law, there speaks nothing against using the evidence we find," she said with a thin smile on her lips as she approached Pettigrew, followed by Kingsley and Moody, who had their wands ready just in case. "Are you Peter Pettigrew?" "Yes." "Where were you born? On the 27th of March 1960. "Yes." "Are you a Death Eater?" she asked, now very serious. "Yes," he replied in a monotone voice after a slight struggle. "Was Sirius Black the secret keeper of the Potters?" "No." At that, a shock went through the older people present in the hall. "Who was the secret keeper and why?" "I was the secret keeper. Sirius believed that everyone would think he was it and they would hunt him down. So he suggested we secretly change it to me. The only people aware of it were me, Lily, James, and Sirius." "So you betrayed the Potters to the Dark Lord?" "Yes, I wanted to be part of the winning side." "I see. And how are you alive?" "The moment Sirius realized that I betrayed them, he began to hunt me down. I knew Sirius and his mentality very well. He would definitely blame himself, and losing what was his family would be a traumatic event for him. Once he found me, all I needed to do was to loudly blame Sirius, and stage my death. I cut off one of my fingers as proof and blew the street off with a blasting curse that I learned from the Dark Lord before turning into my rat animagus form. Soon I found a wizarding family where I could hide as a pet," explained Peter. "So you spent the last 11 years as a pet rat?" "Yes, I lived under my disguise with the Weasleys so I could still follow the news of the wizarding world, waiting for my master's return." That was enough proof for Madam Bones. She once again stunned Pettigrew and turned to Shacklebolt. "Kingsley, head to Azkaban and transport Black into a hearing cell." But at that moment she got interrupted by Mr. Tonks. "My client won't spend any longer in any cells. He is not only innocent but spent the last 11 years detained in Azkaban without a trial. You will transport him instantly to St. Mungo's where he gets the proper treatment. And publish as soon you return a statement of his innocence, or you won't like the legal consequences for the ministry." "He had no trial?" asked Madam Bones as she paled, realizing the consequences of an heir to a most noble and most ancient houses thrown into Azkaban without a trial. "Kingsley, get Black as fast as possible to St. Mungo's," she ordered as the dark-skinned Auror quickly left the castle. The rest began to transport Pettigrew to the ministry after getting a few further statements about his capture. Once they left with Mr. Tonks, who was making sure that everything went as planned, Matthew turned to the headmaster. "Professor, how about you contact the minister and offer him your advice? As far as I could gather information about him, he likes to listen to people like Malfoy and would probably try to hide the truth. But you could suggest that he is correcting the mistakes of the last government, which would send a strong sign, and a proper compensation would make it even better," suggested Matthew. "That is a good idea, Mr. Mason. You seem to have a considerable talent for politics. Are you planning to work for the ministry in the future?" asked Dumbledore with a meaningful look. "Not really. But it doesn't hurt to be prepared for all occasions," explained Matthew. Yes, it is wise to be always ready. Take 50 points for each of you, Mr. Mason, Mr. Weasley. If you would excuse me, I need to visit the ministry," said the old man as he left the hall. Chapter 130, Aftermath. Fred and Matthew located George, Ginny, Ron, Harry, and Hermione, who seemed to have joined them in the kitchen. He previously decided with Fred that they needed to protect Ginny from the whole truth about the information for now. In truth, Matthew just didn't want to alarm Riddle since he didn't know how the Horcrux inside the diary would react. Fred and George led Ginny back into the Gryffindor Tower while Matthew pulled Harry, Hermione, and Ron aside. Ron needed to be informed since he soon would realize that Scabbers was missing. As for Hermione, she would figure out that something was wrong and was sensible enough to prevent Ron from sharing the information with Ginny or someone else. "What's up, Matthew?" asked Harry once they arrived inside an empty classroom. After a short moment of gathering his thoughts, he began to explain, "I have some bad news but also some really good ones." "Huh? Did something happen while we were in the kitchens?" asked Ron, confused. "Yes, first of all, please keep this a secret of Ginny. She is still very young and we don't need to scare her with such news. I am only telling you this because you and Harry are directly affected, and Hermione is her because I believe she will be able to stop you from accidentally making it public." "Okay. So what's going on? Why are you looking at me like that?" replied Ron nervously. "Do you know what an animagus is?" "They are wizards like Professor McGonagall who have the ability to turn into a specific animal. They need to be registered at the Ministry a week after mastering the transformation," explained Matthew. "For some background information, that was just some background info for you to understand what was going on. This summer I visited Harry and his relatives with my parents. And they weren't nice people. So I began to investigate if there is someone else who could take Harry in." "What? You were doing that for me?" asked Harry, shocked. "Yes. And during my investigation, I found out that you have a godfather called Sirius Black who was imprisoned under suspicious circumstances in Azkaban without a trial." "They imprisoned someone without a trial? And that is legal?" asked Hermione, affronted. "Normally not. But there were multiple parties interested in keeping him there. And the legal system of Wizarding Britain runs largely over bribery. That's how a lot of Death Eaters, the followers of Voldemort, got free. While Mr. Black was imprisoned as one of his greatest followers." "And he is innocent?" asked Harry, saddened. "Yes, once I found it suspicious I decided to hire a lawyer to help me with the research. And we were able to contact one of your father's last friends that were alive or free. That friend couldn't take you in because of how bigoted the society is. He wasn't even allowed to contact you because of his illness and would be happy if you decided to contact him. His name is Remus Lupin. Your father had 3 good friends in Hogwarts and Mr. Lupin was one of them. Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew, who was apparently killed by Sirius, were the others." "I see. And by the sound of it, Peter Pettigrew isn't dead. Was he an animagus?" realized Harry as he listened to Matthew's explanation. "Correct, Harry. In fact, your father, Sirius, and Pettigrew were all animagi. Your father's form was a stag, his nickname was Prongs, Sirius was a large black dog called Padfoot, and lastly, Pettigrew was a rat called Wormtail. Mr. Lupin's nickname is Moony. As for the details, you should ask him yourself. I believe he will tell you the truth, just keep an open mind and about it and don't believe the typical slander. You should already know yourself that not everything the general public believes is the truth." "Okay, I will do that. So my father was a stag. That's cool. And, wait. Scabbers was an animagus?" shouted Ron, shocked. "Wait, a middle-aged man slept for years in my bed. Ah. And he lived with my family. Oh God." He realized as he visibly paled. "Yes, that's why we are keeping the truth from Ginny. If she should ask what happened to Scabbers, just tell her he runs away. Okay, that's so disgusting, said Ron. I would suggest you talk with your parents about it or with Professor McGonagall. It's better to get some help from adults than to bottle it up inside yourself, suggested Matthew. I will do that. Where is he now? Did you alarm the teachers? The Arrows are already transporting him to the ministry, while they are bringing Sirius to St. Mungo's, where he will get treatment for many years of Dementor exposure. The professors were also present during the interrogation, explained Matthew. Dementors? What is that? When will I meet Sirius? Asked Harry, still shocked about the events. Dementors are the guardians of Azkaban. They are the darkest creature walking on our planet, interjected Hermione, remembering what she read about them. Correct. They are living by devouring the happiness of humans. And they even eat souls. They are just disgusting. But unfortunately, they are immortal. Because of that, the Ministry has no choice but to control them somehow. So they turned Azkaban into the most terrible prison in the world, in order to control these dark creatures. That's terrifying. Will Sirius be okay? He must have been there for 11 years. Realized Harry, worried. Sirius had one advantage over the other prisoners. Nobody knew he was an animagus, and he spent a lot of time in his dog form, which weakened the effect of the Dementors. My lawyer was able to confirm that by arranging a meeting with him to get a statement from him. His wife is Sirius' cousin, so he was able to visit him under the pretense of an inheritance question. So Sirius should be fine. Phew, that's good. So should I write him also a letter? Asked Harry. Yes, that's a good idea. You were the second reason how he kept his sanity. The memory that you were out there kept him sane. So if you write him, I believe it would even help with the healing process. It wouldn't be strange if in a few months he even comes personally to visit you, replied Matthew with a smile. Then I will write him and Mr. Lupin. They probably can tell me a lot of stories about my parents, said Harry, now with his face brightening. Yes, and you won't need to spend a lot of time with the Dursleys again, added Matthew. What do you mean? Asked Harry. Sirius is your legal guardian according to the will of your parents. Now that he is free, he can take care of you. Mr. Lupin was actually the next one on that list, but the Ministry Extra created laws to prevent that. So Merry Christmas, Harry. That was actually the gift I was planning for Christmas for you, explained Matthew. So I won't need to return to the Dursleys again? Asked the young boy. That I don't know yet, since I have a feeling that Dumbledore will have something to say about that. But that's something he and Sirius will have to discuss. I am sure that you will spend the majority of your holidays with Sirius, since he also should be able to keep you safe. The ancient seat of the Black family has wards almost as old and powerful as Hogwarts. That's it, guys. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also tell me in the comments what you want to see next and if you have any recommendations.